The hush in the vast hearing room was palpable, as though time itself held its breath. The sticky scent of old leather and polished wood hovered heavy in the air, mingling with the distant hum of footsteps in the corridor. High above, the pale, morning light sliced through tall windows, casting dramatic slashes of gold across the boardroom table where John Kennedy sat. Fingers curled around a tumbler of ice-cold water that rattled with each terse inhale. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her eyes sparking with quiet fire, her lips pressed in a tight line. At that moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. Every pulse, every shifting shadow, every tick of the clock counted as both threat and promise. John Kennedy was once known as the idealistic young attorney who rose from a scrappy small-town upbringing. Born to a steelworker father and a nurse mother in a rust-stained Midwestern town, he learned early the meaning of grit and fairness. His childhood, defined by the hum of generators and the scent of antiseptic. He carried those lessons into law school, driven by a burning faith that the law could be a shield for the weak. Now, with a poised reserve and an inner ache of self-doubt, he faced Jasmine in what would become a hearing destined to set the internet ablaze. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett's history was woven with grit and empathy. A first-generation college graduate, she grew up helping her immigrant parents run a small corner store. She learned to negotiate, to stand tall amid adversity, and to dream bigger than the cracked linoleum floorboards of her childhood. She'd become a fierce advocate for social justice, her voice a resonant chorus for the marginalized. Her laughter rich with memory of late-night debates over burnt-out light bulbs in the family store. Yet beneath her steely confidence lay a quiet ache, the fear that her efforts might be erased. Her momentum splintered by systemic inertia. The hearing had two stakes, not just a legal determination at hand, but a microcosm of two intertwined moral universes. Kennedy represented a new policy initiative, touted as pragmatic, but, some critics claimed, too cold, too cautious, lacking humanity. Jasmine questioned whether pragmatism had become just a word for compromise that leaves the vulnerable behind. As the hearing began, Kennedy opened with clipped precision. His words were unassailable, fact charts, figures, precedents. But he faltered as Jasmine rose to speak. She began softly, voice low with quiet conviction, recounting story after story of individuals who had fallen through cracks, single mothers, wage workers, students. The room shifted, the sterile light of statistics replaced by the warmth of human faces formed in the mind. That was our first turning point. Jasmine's voice, rising like a wave, exposed a fault line in Kennedy's armor. He paused his composure, faltered the cameras, long cameras recording every word, captured the flicker of doubt in his gaze. And then, entirely unguarded, she said, "I see them." In that moment, her reaction, not a flourish, not a gesture, went viral. Her eyes glistened. It wasn't performance, it was truth. Overnight, hashtags bloomed. It wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. The first subplot rippled outward. Jasmine's own inner confrontation. At home that night, she put her daughter to bed. Her hands shook as she tucked the blanket. She thought back to her mother's hands caressed, carrying, and wondered if she was pushing too hard, whether fame could overtake substance. She feared losing touch with who she was before the cameras, before viral moments. She lit a candle. In the stillness of her apartment, staring into its wavering flame as silent tears traced patterns of longing on her cheeks. Meanwhile, Kennedy had his own subplot churning beneath the surface. That night, he returned to the empty apartment he shared with stale regrets. Gathering takeaway boxes at his small dining table, he scrolled through news feeds, the video of the hearing plastered on every platform, tens of thousands of shares. He felt the weight of misalignment. Had his words been right, but lacking compassion? He recalled his father's last words, "Never forget the people." That echo haunted him now. He poured himself another drink and sat in darkness, wrestling with the voice that said pragmatism alone isn't enough. The next day, both returned to the hearing, on different paths. Jasmine watched as her story sparked conversations in living rooms, offices, kitchens. But she held fast, determined not to be swallowed by the current of attention. Kennedy walked in with renewed clarity, not to defend policy, but to bridge policy with empathy. When he spoke, his tone was softer, more human. He told a story from his own youth, of being the kid picked last in kickball, of the teacher who noticed his hand trembling and offered a second chance. He spoke of small kindnesses. The room leaned in. Their exchange turned again. Kennedy, vulnerable now, asked Jasmine, "How do we ensure no one feels invisible?" It wasn't a challenge, but an opening. Their dialogue broke the hearing apart, not into adversaries, but allies. The second subplot blossomed behind the scenes. Staffers who had witnessed the hearing, a young intern on Jasmine's team, who saw in her a model of courage, began drafting a youth mentorship initiative, and an aide in Kennedy's office, moved by his shift, started organizing community listening sessions. In the tense moments that followed, a power outage plunged the rooms into darkness, as fate demanded they step outside the austere hearing hall. In the courtyard, moonlight and emergency lights danced on their faces. Without podiums, without protocols, they just were two humans, trying to make sense of something bigger. Kennedy looked up at Jasmine and asked, voice cracked, "Is it naive to hope we can actually change things?" Jasmine's reply came gentle, resolute, "Maybe hope is the bravest choice." In that stillness, their two worlds converged, resolved, but aligned enough to imagine a bridge. The climax arrived when the hearing reconvened the next morning. Cameras, reporters, onlookers filled the room. Jasmine and Kennedy each gave closing remarks. Jasmine spoke of resilience, of stories that need telling. Kennedy spoke of systems that must serve people, and together, they proposed a joint framework policy, with empathy, data, with stories. The hearing ended uncertain, but with possibility. In the resolution, we see change unfolding. A flurry of community listening sessions, inspired by that hearing and the viral reaction. Jasmine and Kennedy hosting town halls in local libraries and cafes. The interns' mentorship program launches, pairing young people with civic leaders. The aides' listening sessions draw diverse voices into policy discussions, and in their personal worlds, healing and growth continue. Jasmine holds her daughter close, whispering, "You matter." Kennedy calls his father's old friend to say, "I heard you." The arc ends not with perfection, but with alignment. Two people reshaped by the collision of ideals and empathy. As the final dusk settles, the narrator would say, "We leave them not as icons, but as people inspired, vulnerable, believing that the greatest victories come when policies and compassion intertwine." The life lesson becomes clear, that real change blossoms when passion meets precision, when the facts meet the feeling, and when we dare to hope through bracketed fear, finding courage in one another. Let your breath settle. In that silence, consider your own hearing room's moments when empathy meets resolve, and ask, will you be the one to say, "I see you"?